Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Cohen, the CEO of the Tikvah Fund. As we all know, our people, our Jewish nation, our way of life was attacked this weekend by a brutal network of terrorists and the nations that support them. And once again, the state of Israel finds itself on the fighting front lines of Western civilization. Our purpose tonight is to have a conversation between Mosaic editor Jonathan Silver and Tikvah's chairman and one of the world's real experts on Middle East policy and foreign policy in general, Elliott Abrams. But before they begin that discussion, I wanted to offer a few words about Tikvah's strategic focus in this moment of great consequence in Jewish history. First and foremost, we will continue to focus on educating young people. We spent a lot of time trying to teach young Jews about Jewish history. And we do this both to give them a sense of the majesty and weight of Jewish civilization that they have a responsibility to carry forward, and so that they learn the hard-won lessons of the Jewish past, our wars, our statesmen, our moments of crisis and decision that have led us to this period where we have a state of Israel, where we have a Jewish nation, where we have sovereignty in our own holy land. We will continue to teach young people, and already over the last 48 hours, we've been reaching out to teachers, educators, parents, trying to arm them with resources, programs, opportunities for youngsters to continue to learn in a moment where I think all of us as Jews are looking for ways to find a deeper connection. Second, we'll continue to do briefings like we're doing this evening. We have hundreds of thousands of people that follow Tikvah's work, looking for both strategic insights about the Middle East and about Israel and about the America-Israel relationship, as well as deeper wisdom about the riches of Jewish life that we live and fight to preserve. We'll continue to do our work on the auspices of Mosaic and the Tikvah podcasts and other vehicles, both to try to sustain the highest level conversation about where we are in the Jewish world today in this unique moment, and also to try to continue to invigorate our people with the spirit of Jewish resolve. Third, we're going to focus a lot of effort on what's going on in our universities. Already there's been absurd examples of anti-Israel, hateful activity at many of our leading campuses, and we have hundreds of Tikvah students that have already mobilized, real student leaders that have the energy to try to fight for what we believe in, for Jewish and Zionist values, and to stand up against the parades of hate that we're seeing at universities across the country. Fourth, we're going to make a big effort to reach out to our Christian friends and allies. There's no community in America more important than evangelicals, Catholics, other friends of the Jewish people and the Jewish state who see their values and their purpose tied up with Israel and with the Jewish people. We've always built deep friendships and alliances with our Christian friends, and in this moment of consequence, we will try to bring our voice to that Christian community so they can bring their strength to us. And finally, and I'd say most importantly, in this moment of consequence, we will stand with our partners, our staff, our team in Israel. Tikvah Israel has been for many years a thriving enterprise of young people that are thinking about the big challenges facing the Jewish state. And nowhere and no moment is more important for that strategic insight. Now, many people on our team have already been called into service, including our CEO and leader, Cohen. I called him a few minutes before this briefing to see if he might join us to just show the leadership that he's showing and the resolve of the Israeli people. And he agreed to do it. And so, Amiad, if you're there from the fighting front lines, join us for a minute. It would be an honor to see you and hear a few words of reflection.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here on the northern border of Israel speaking to you, despite the disastrous terrorist attack that we experienced a couple of nights ago. I'm here part of a 300,000 strong army waiting to be unleashed to fight against our enemies. We lost a lot of friends. We were hurt. We lost the numbers that will be revealed in the next couple of days will be disastrous. But don't forget, we know our historical position. We understand that this is our moment to show our strength, to be part of the heritage of the Jewish people, to be the representation of the Jewish people around the world today and about the people of Israel today, we understand the historical burden and our responsibility for the future of the Jewish people. I'm sitting with my friends in arms here up in the north, just waiting to fight. We're strong. We need to understand, forget about all what you hear in the media about the problems of the IDF. No army in the world, aside of the Chinese one, the American one, can draft in a matter of hours 300,000 soldiers with minimal logistical problems to fight against its enemies. The spirit here is very, very strong, and all my friends here are just waiting to fight. Now, we know that it's going to be hard. We know that part of us will not come back, but we're eager and willing to end the fact that we were surrounded by enemies and regimes of people who only want to murder us every second they will be able to. We need to end this fight with Hamas for once and for all and destroy the Hamas regime and everyone who wants to kill us up in the south. And we need to, if it will happen, and I believe it will happen, we will need to fight against Hezbollah and destroy them too. It's hard, it will be tough, it will be long, but we're strong here and we're going to do it as whatever is needed for the success and for the thriving and survival of the Jewish people. Thank you and thank you for your support.
Amiad, thank you for your leadership, for your spirit of Jewish courage. Tikvah stands with you, America stands with you, and may the Jewish people be quickly led to victory by you and your comrades in arms. We return you to your important work on the battlefield. I now turn this over for a discussion to really assess the current situation and make strategic sense of the challenges ahead to my colleagues, Jonathan Silver, Elliott Abrams. I turn this over to you.
Eric, thank you. And thank you, Amiad. Amiad, there's about 5,000 people who registered for this discussion tonight, and next to them are 5,000 more husbands and wives and children and neighbors. And as you work to protect the land of Israel and the people of Israel, I want you to know that there are in America thousands upon thousands of women and men, Christians and Jews who are praying for you. Ladies and gentlemen, the world changed on Saturday when Hamas terrorists breached Israel's borders by sea, land, and air, occupied over 20 Israeli communities, murdered hundreds, wounded thousands of Israeli civilians, and captured over 100 Israeli children, women, and men, brought them as hostages inside of Gaza. We've come together as a Tikvah community, parents and children, readers and students, to make sense of a catastrophe, the single bloodiest day in Israeli history. Now, our guide to that strategic questions, to the political questions, our guide to this moment is Elliott Abrams, the chairman of Tikvah, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, formerly Secretary Pompeo's special representative to Iran and Venezuela. Before that, he had the Middle East portfolio at the National Security Council. One note before we begin, given the vast size of the audience that's together with us this evening, we're not going to be able to entertain much by way of audience questions, but we will make sure that there's a recording of this event available in the next couple of days, and we look forward to engaging you in other areas of our work. Elliott, I want to just begin by thanking you for being here and to tell you welcome.
Thanks, John. I'm very happy to be here.
Elliott, the first question. Israel's vaunted intelligence services, the Shabak, Israel's military forces, with a reputation for being so tactically and operationally sound. How on earth did this happen?
Within a few months, Israel will appoint a National Commission of Inquiry, and in 6 or 9 months, we'll have a much fuller answer to that. But I'd say two things, two key words. One, conception, and the other, Iran. It's not possible, in my view, that Hamas would have been able to do this without enormous amounts of help from Iran. Thinking it through, practicing it, having all the equipment needed, having the money needed. It seems to me that Hezbollah's sophistication in doing this, for example, drones to take out Israeli observation cameras along the border, To me, this speaks of a very serious effort on the part of Iran. The other part is the word conception, and that is, 9/11, we didn't connect the dots. It never occurred to us that these backward people in Al-Qaeda in the hills could commandeer jets and take down the World Trade Center. In 1973, it did not occur to Israelis. So soon after the 67 war, that Arab states would attack them. There were signs. They were misread. Here, the conception was that Israel had a modus vivendi with Hamas. Every once in a while, Hamas would send rockets over the border. Israel had various forms of missile defense now, so not too much damage was done. It seemed that Hamas wanted to create violence in the West Bank. But in Gaza, where they govern, it seemed as if they wanted a kind of stability. And that was completely wrong. It was the Israeli conception now for, really, I'd say, since they left Gaza in 2005, so 18 years. But that conception, which government after government believed, and which the IDF believed, and which I think the intelligence people believed, turns out to have been a brilliant ruse by Hamas.
You have to ask yourself, or I ask myself, if Hamas succeeded, then they would be bringing upon themselves the kind of damage that a normal people would not want to invite. If they failed, it would be very bad. If they succeeded, it might be even worse. And one doesn't know what the Netanyahu administration is preparing to do precisely, but they've said that their plan is to neutralize Hamas offensive weapon capabilities, Hamas's political ability to govern. It's not looking good for Hamas right now. So why would they do that?
First, they took over Gaza in 2007. And Israel has not really made an effort to eliminate them in that period. There have been lots of, almost every couple of years, there have been Israeli invasions of Gaza and attacks on Hamas, but never, I think, the kind that we're going to see. And Hamas may have thought we'll survive it. The other thing, and this is hard for us, what you're describing, first of all, is an enormous amount of damage to Gaza and the people who live there, and they don't care. They absolutely don't care.
Meaning Hamas doesn't care.
Hamas doesn't care. I mean, they will put pictures of children on international TV screens and say, you see, Israel did this, and the more the better. They don't care. Do they care about being completely eliminated and destroyed? I think they do, but they must be making a calculation that at least a remnant will survive, and with Iranian help, they can rebuild. And if it takes another 10 years, that's fine with them. But they put no value on human life. And it's not just Jewish life, which they wish to take. They put no value on Palestinian life, none. And they're perfectly happy to see the entire population sacrificed. It's hard for us to sort of get it, that what they said in the Hamas charter, they mean. And this phrase that we occasionally hear from Israelis, that when people say to you that they want to kill Jews, believe them. Hamas and the Hamas charter are the best exemplar of that.
So if you were to advise the Israeli government, what do you think they should do?
I think they have no choice but to do what we all expect them to do in Gaza. They have really not wanted to do this. Prime Minister Netanyahu, 14 years in office, has really not wanted to. And I can't say there's been a huge desire on the part of the Israeli population, because everyone understands how difficult it will be. And again, they thought they could live with Hamas. But now it turns out that they will die with Hamas. So there is an alternative. And now it's very clear that the Israeli people believe there is no alternative to this, to going in on the ground, as well as from the air and the sea, and doing everything they can to kill all of the Hamas leaders. You know, they haven't, I mean, if you think about it, we read month after month statements by Hamas leaders in Turkey or in Qatar, where they live quite well, with no apparent effort by Israel to kill them. I think that is the kind of thing we'll also see change outside of Gaza. This will be an all-out effort.
I mean, I'm curious just to pursue that for a moment. There are Hamas leaders that have residence and frequently visit and undertake their work outside of Israel altogether, in Turkey, in Qatar, and other places.
Yep.
Would you be surprised if there were targeted assassinations elsewhere?
I would be surprised if there were not. And Mossad, you know, look, if you can assassinate people inside Iran, which they can and do, then these are easier targets. So I would assume that that is part of the plan, to eliminate, to the extent that they can, the entire Hamas leadership, first inside Gaza, and over a longer period of time outside Gaza.
Okay, but then this leads to a question. If you just pursue that line of thought, so let's say the Israelis are successful in wresting political leadership from Gaza, maybe neutralizing political leadership from Hamas. Maybe they're able to destroy Hamas as an institution altogether. Mm-hmm. So then what?
Well, this is a very, very hard question. Israel didn't want Gaza. I mean, Gaza was in the hands of Egypt. Menachem Begin tried to get Sadat to take it back after the '67 war, which Sadat would not do. When Sharon left in 2005, the thought was that the Palestinian Authority would take over, and it did from 2005 to 2007, until it was kicked out by Hamas. And the PA is very, very weak. This is a very, very hard question. Who will govern Gaza? If Israel succeeds in what it's trying to do to Hamas, my assumption is they may try, with the help of Egypt, to put the PA back there. There are some people connected to the PA, I think of Mohammed Dahlan, who was a Fatah leader, who is a Gazan and may have some support there. It will need some Israeli involvement and Egyptian involvement, but you know, the fundamental question can be asked about the West Bank as well, because President Mahmoud Abbas is now, I think, 88. Who will govern in the West Bank? This is the question that people who keep intoning two-state solution, two-state solution, two-state solution, never answer. Who will govern the Palestinian state? And Israel may be just a few weeks away from trying to answer that in Gaza.
So it sounds like there's not a real clear succession plan or the ability to have real predictions about the sustainability of government in the West Bank, to which then the best thinking is we would add on top of the West Bank administration of Gaza.
Well, there is one thing that Israel did wrong with respect to Gaza and has been doing wrong for a long time. Sharon got out of Gaza and in 2005 and said, if there are any rockets or missiles, anything hostile coming from Gaza, we'll crush it immediately. And he didn't do it. In the fall of 2005, it started pretty quickly. Now, he was a sick man and just a few months later had his second stroke. But Israel didn't establish deterrence. I noticed, for example, Meir Ben Shabbat, the former national security advisor, suggesting now a buffer zone, let's say half a mile or a quarter mile inside Gaza, saying this is a no man's land. This means that Israel needs to bomb it, bulldoze it, clear it now. Tell anybody who lives there, get out or you're dead. And then say, this is a buffer zone. Anyone who enters it will be shot instantly. This is a no man's land. Well, they didn't do that. They never did that. They never reestablished deterrence after the fall of 2005. And, the sense we all have is that they recognize now that in the end, that policy failed and it's got to be abandoned.
You mentioned in your discussion of the conception, the intelligence conception of what Hamas wanted and what Hamas was capable of. You mentioned the conception, and for people who are students of history, of course, there's a big resonance of that term, referring to the 1973 Yom Kippur War, on which this attack was closely near which this attack was closely timed. That war, historians now believe, you could sort of map these strategic desires and the strategic outcomes from the very beginning of the war. And it wasn't sure that that was going to happen. It wasn't sure that Sadat was going to be able to flip from the Soviets to the American camp. It wasn't sure that that Kissinger would be able to negotiate some kind of arrangement so that eventually Egypt and Israel would be able to form a durable peace. But you could see the elements of that even at the beginning of the war. And I suppose the question is, in this case, what would a strategic victory look like for Israel? What would a visionary strategist want out of this? Want out of the chaos that's been unleashed now?
The first thing you would want is to crush Hamas, so that, as the prime minister said, this can never be repeated, so that the threat from Gaza is eliminated for the entire foreseeable future. The second thing more broadly is you want to reestablish Israeli deterrence, Israeli power, which was so badly damaged on Saturday, and which had been built up from the 67 war and the turnaround in the 73 war, when Israel began by losing and then turned around, then built on. So you need to rebuild that. It's one of the reasons that Israel is so attractive to its new and its potential Arab partners. You also want, I think, to deter Hezbollah. We just heard Amiad suggest that there might be a war coming in the north. If there is an Iranian strategic view here, it is probably to do what they just did. And at the height of Israeli engagement in Gaza, let us think in 2 weeks, to start a war in the north. There are many people who think that will happen. I'm less convinced it will happen because I still believe that Hezbollah is basically Iran's way of deterring an Israeli strike at Iran, and they want it. I hope they want to maintain it there to prevent Israel from striking the Iranian nuclear program. If Israel did, then they would, in a sense, order Hezbollah into action. So I'm not so sure, because think of where Iran is if, after terrible war and a lot of suffering on the part of Israel and Israelis, there is basically no Hamas and no Hezbollah. Iran has really been badly hurt at that point. And the hope would be that they won't risk it, and that Israel will say they wouldn't risk it because they knew the outcome would be that we would destroy Hezbollah.
You mentioned Israel's new Arab and potential friends in the Gulf and throughout the region. What do you think the implications of the events of the weekend and the war that's to come? What do you think the implications are for a potential deal with the Saudis?
Well, I think on the military side, Israel's got to win. To Israelis, the country looked weak and humiliated on Saturday. They've got to turn that around in however many weeks or months it takes, so that at the end, it is like 73 with real victory, with what you might call an unequivocal victory. That's critical. Now, the Saudis, in my opinion, can't get closer to Israel while this war goes on, and for some time after it. And I think the others will pull back a little bit because they even though they are, to say the least, not democracies, there is such a thing as public opinion, and it will be deliberately inflamed by agents of Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the populace will not want at that moment to see their government getting closer with the Israeli government. So I think the rapprochement with the Saudis is now off for for a year, let's say. The Saudis want it, but Israel, they will want it more the clearer Israel's victory here is.
It's interesting because it's actually a very useful way to step inside the power dynamics of the Middle East, because otherwise you might have thought that you make the Saudi deal more likely the more that you value the lives of your Arab antagonists.
It's a real misreading of Arab politics.
Yeah.
If anyone believed that, they want Israel's strength and power and reliability. Their relationships with Israel is built on its, on its high-tech power, on its economic power, and above all, its military power. Their concern for the lives of innocent Palestinians is, in my view, mostly political. That is, again, their own populations. They want things calm inside their countries, in particular Saudi Arabia, which is in the middle of a huge social and economic transformation. This Vision 2030. For that, they need calm. So I think the best thing from the Saudi point of view, this would have been that this did not happen. Today, the best thing is Israel crushes and destroys Hamas as quickly as possible. They won't say that, but I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah. I want to turn to the now thinking about this as an American. Iran kills Americans in Syria. Iran kills Americans in Iraq. We know, I think President Biden mentioned today that 11 Americans were murdered by Hamas, Iran's proxy in Gaza this weekend. What can America do? What should America do?
Well, having spoken about the Israeli conception about Hamas that was wrong, we've had plenty of wrong conceptions too. 9/11 is one. The view that if we made China richer, they would become more friendly is another. And the view of Iran. And the difference is, I think, on China, for example, that was a very, very widely shared view in the United States. The view that we could make peace with Iran, as President Obama once said, tell our allies in the Gulf and Israel to share the region with Iran, led to things like the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, the efforts more recently to restore the Iran nuclear deal, the reduction in sanctions on Iran. Just to give you numbers, and I think these are correct, when the last administration left office, Iran's usable, reachable international financial reserves were down to $4 billion, and they're up now to about 70. That's a lot of money. And it's because sanctions, in my opinion, have not really been energetically enforced. And now we had the hostage deal that will give them another roughly $10 billion. This is wrong. And US policy, in my opinion, should change. Iran is not the people of Iran, but the Islamic Republic, the regime, is going to be hostile to this country forever. It is not to be forgotten that the two main slogans of the regime are death to Israel and death to America. So we should have a policy that reflects that, which is to say, if I can borrow a phrase, maximum pressure. That means trying to prevent or reduce oil exports from Iran and imports of Iranian oil anywhere. It means trying to interfere wherever we can with Iranian finances with the way they do business around and move money around the world. It means trying to squeeze Iran in every way possible, including diplomatically. It means a huge human rights campaign against Iran, because everybody knows that it's a vicious and brutal regime and that the Iranian people hate it, but it hasn't been enough of a part of our own policy. Remember President Obama saying that in retrospect, he agrees he should have supported the people of Iran when they rose up in 2009. So we need to do much more of that. And then we get to the other question. They've been killing Americans basically since 1979, since they took over Iran. They killed Americans at Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia and at the Marine barracks in Lebanon. They killed Americans, hundreds of Americans in Iraq, directly and through proxies. And we have basically never struck back. My own view would be that that's the only language they're really going to listen to, and that we should contemplate. I'm not a military planner. I'm not in this administration. But when you kill what may be 11 and maybe 20 Americans through your proxy, I think we should contemplate some kind of military reaction. I'm not suggesting World War III. I'm not suggesting sending 100,000 Marines, but there are plenty of Iranian targets that would send a very clear message to Iran that you cannot kill Americans and be immune from very harsh punishment. They don't believe that now.
One of the most heartbreaking things, I mean, I'm sure you, Elliott, saw all these horrible videos. I was watching them.
I tried to see as few of them as possible because they're too upsetting.
Well, I mean, ladies and gentlemen in our audience, I'm sure have seen some of them. They are heartbreaking.
They are
heartbreaking. And
they're worse than they're more than heartbreaking. Of course, they're deeply infuriating as well. We haven't seen some of those photos. We haven't seen anything like that literally since the Nazis.
Well, you just think about on a human level, there's over 100 people taken hostage inside Gaza right now. You don't know what's happening to them. God willing, that they're safe. But I know that in your previous work in the American government, working on the Venezuela desk, working on the Iran desk, you've actually had to deal with families whose members of which have been taken hostage. And we'll get to the policy in a moment. I think that's very important. But just on a human level, what's that like?
It's murder. It's murder to sit with someone who's, in one case in Iran, father and brother were imprisoned for years. In another case, a father imprisoned for years. And you tell them, I wanted to meet with you, and they want the human contact, and they want to tell you this story. Who was he? Who is he? And what has it meant to the family that he, and in a few cases she, is missing? Those meetings are just murder. I mean, that's, you look at your schedule today and you've got 15 meetings to do in the State Department, White House, wherever. And then you see that meeting with the family, and that's the hardest meeting of any day. It's just murder, because you can't promise success. We're trying and we're doing everything we can, and we're working with the Qataris, or we're working with the Vatican, but you can't promise them that you'll get the guy out, and they know it. It's very, very hard.
So begin to dimension for us the complexities when you're thinking about this from the point of view of a government. Just by way of contrast or reference, the soldier Gilad Shalit was an Israeli soldier was taken captive into Gaza and was there for years, and that single soldier was a catalyzing political force in Israel for years.
Yep.
There are 130 Gilad Shalits in Gaza tonight.
Many people listening will have, during visits to Israel, driven by the Prime Minister's residents and seen people camping out years ago. Free Gilad, get Gilad home. That's always been Israeli policy. Free 1,000 people to free one. Sharon did this once with someone who actually was a fairly shady business character who was captured and was held by Syria. And Sharon was willing to do almost anything to get him out, pay any price. And many on his own staff thought, it's a mistake. And Sharon said to me at one point, I can't sleep. I think of this man in the hands of the Syrians. That's over, in my opinion. I think it's over. When they capture a person like Gilad Shalit, or they capture a soldier, or in the case of Hezbollah in 2006, 3 soldiers they kill and whose bodies they steal. This is how Israel has treated it. And what did it produce? It produced 150 hostages. It produced who knows how many dead, 1,000, 1,500. It produced those scenes that you are mentioning. And I don't think they're going to do that now. I may be wrong, but I think that the determination now is we've got to do what we've got to do to Hamas, or in 1 or 2 or 5 years, it'll be my daughter and my husband and my father and my grandmother. So my sense is, and this is an awful thing for the government of Israel. Hamas has already said today, for every day there's a bombing of Gaza, we're going to kill a hostage. Israel cannot stop the invasion, cannot stop destroying Hamas because of that. And I think this is awful. This is terrible. It's a democratic government. It's a free people. It's the Jewish people. It's a small country where everyone knows someone else. People are not, 10 dimensions of distance, but 1 or 2. I think they're going to have to, in this case, say we can't today play that game anymore. We're going to have to do what we do. And when it's over in a month or 2 months, okay, then we'll start negotiating for hostages. But not now.
So we're looking on as most of us as Americans, and feel impotent. We want to do something. We don't know what to do. What should we do?
The position of the American government is critical. President Biden made a really wonderful statement, I thought, on Saturday. We've seen that change. In one of these Gaza small wars under President Obama, President Obama tried to restrict the amounts of military supplies going to Israel and the way they used helicopters. In the 2006 war under President George W. Bush, I saw the State Department after a couple of weeks start saying, get the war to end, bring war to an end. We have to tell Israel to stop. That's going to happen. It'll come from politicians, senators, members of the House. It'll come from so-called opinion leaders. It'll come from Europe. They're good this week. They won't be so good in a week or 2. Therefore, whatever state you live in, whatever congressional district you're in, it's critical. If you're a voter, if you're a donor, it's critical that you reach out and say to people, this is how we're going to judge you. Are you solid? And not just today, but are you doing what actually the president said, which is we are not going to change this policy. We are with Israel all the way. I think he means that. I don't know that everybody in the administration will think that in a couple of weeks. So that's critical. Politics. I think it's important to reach out to everybody you know in Israel, even if it's just a very short thinking of you. I think it matters to people because of what they're going through, and will be going through, because more Israelis are going to die in this war. So they need our moral support. It's impossible now, but when the conflict ends, go there, visit there, show your face there, tell them face to face of your support. Amiad was telling us before we began that they don't really have him. He was actually called up. He's in the reserves. They don't have any shortages, but they may have shortages in the coming weeks. And that is, by the way, a specific message to give political leaders: resupply, endless amounts of resupply. What President Nixon did in 1973. There are other things that can be done for those who have students on campuses, and here Tikvah can help. And I know it's a feeling we all have, that we want to do more. Right now, this burden falls on our brethren in Israel, not on us. But our country, our government, is going to be critical to their success. And if there is a northern front, the strains on Israel are going to be much greater. And the call for help, certainly for resupply from the United States, is going to be more urgent, as it was in 1973. So I know we all have a feeling that we'd like to do more, but there are some things we can do to express solidarity verbally and then physically with Israelis.
You know, the intellectual, moral, political impulse of Zionism was that the Jewish people would return to history in the state of their own, and they would be responsible for themselves. And to watch the Israeli military, begin to operate, you wish them well as they undertake the important work of defending the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Nevertheless, you just sometimes overcome by gratitude that we can also be citizens of the United States. And the U.S.-Israel relationship is just one of these providential blessings of history. And it's at a moment like this when you really feel that. Thank you for guiding us about how to try to secure it and make it better.
Well, it's it's going to be critically important, even if this is only, let us say, a 1-month war. They already, I think, need resupplies because I think many people were shocked at the number of rockets and missiles that Hamas has already expended. One of the things Israel is going to have to do when this is over is think again, how are they able to build so many or smuggle in so many at sea or through Egypt? So there will be a reckoning here. There'll have to be accountability for this. But for now, what our country needs to do is support them diplomatically. That means the United Nations and anywhere else. Morally, which is really very important. They need to know they're not alone. They're not alone today, but they may be nearly alone in a couple of weeks. And then militarily. And this is important for us as a country because Israel is a very close ally. And every other ally and enemy watches. What does the United States do when a very close ally is attacked? Do we do everything we can for their victory? And the answer to that has got to be yes, or we're damaging our country and our own security.
Ladies and gentlemen, to continue to learn more about what's happening in Israel, I encourage you to engage with our work at the Tikvah podcast and Mosaic, to continue to send your students, your children, your colleagues to classes that we offer at Tikvah, where we try to put some of the contemporary dilemmas in the context of Israeli, Zionist, Jewish history. And as Eric said in the beginning of our conversation, some of the most volatile arenas of conflict in the coming days and weeks are going to be on college campuses, where we have a robust presence and would always be eager to engage and try to lend a hand when we can. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we're going to adjourn. Elliott, thank you.
You're welcome, John. Good night.